With a standard hub fitted, 15mm on the inside is what we'd call a pretty narrow front track width. Now with 35mm spaces on the inside of the hub, this is what we would consider a wider front track width. An alternative to changing the front track width is to change the front hub width. So this is the standard short hub that comes with the go-kart, and this is a longer one that's available for tuning the frame. Hey go-kart tuning gods, after you've mastered tyre pressures and rear track widths, which we covered in last week's video, you're going to need to know how to change your front track width, when and why, and that's going to be covered in today's video. If you're new to go-karting, one of the simplest tuning tips that I can give you is moving the front track width. Now, it does affect the kart in many different ways, but generally speaking, narrow karts turn faster, wider karts are more stable. On most go-karts, it's a 22mm nut that holds either the wheel on the stub axle or the front wheel hub. So with the 22mm socket, this is a 1/2" drive ratchet, but you could use anything. Just undo that center wheel nut. Then carefully remove the spaces that are on the outside of the wheel, and then you can remove the wheel and the wheel hub from the stub axle. Wheel spaces come in both 10 and 5mm increments. 5mm is generally enough for most people, but you can, or I have seen, smaller again if you do want some finer adjustment, but they would be aftermarket. On a 17mm stub axle on the Tony Kart, there's a groove on the first washer, and it's got a fillet on there to fit inside the fillet of the stub axle. So always put this one on first with the groove hard up against the shoulder of the stub axle. With a standard hub fitted, 15mm on the inside is what we'd call a pretty narrow front track width. And this would be great on a tight and twisty track, or if you had some chronic oversteer. Now with 35mm spaces on the inside of the hub, this is what we would consider a wider front track width, and this would be better on higher speed corners or if you had some chronic understeer. An alternative to changing the front track width is to change the front hub width. So this is the standard short hub that comes with the go-kart, and this is a longer one that's available for tuning the frame. The beauty of the longer hub is that the bearings are further apart and it gives the stub axle a little bit more rigidity, activating the front end of the go-kart that little bit more, working the tyres. So instead of having to move your little hub all the way out along the stub axle, you can just add a bigger hub. To give you an example of what a longer hub versus a shorter hub will do, this is in our short hub wide track. We're going to measure from the edge of the kingpin out to a reference point like the back flange face here where the wheel would bolt to, and we're at 115mm with 35mm of wheel spaces. With the wider hub installed and still 35mm of spaces on the inside, you can see here now we've got to delete the extra 20mm of wheel spaces from the outside of the wheel hub because the bearings are further apart. And also too, we've now increased our overall track width by the same amount. This is now 136mm from the edge of the kingpin. So what we can do to run with the same overall track width with our wider hub, remove 20mm of spaces from the inside, slide on our wider hub onto our stub axle, replace the wheel spaces to the outside, and now we should have roughly the same track width overall. So this is 117mm, which is pretty close to the same as what it was with the extra wheel spaces here but the short hub. So we've got a little bit more rigidity in the front, we should make the tyres bite a little bit more with the bigger hub versus the shorter hub. Now that we've finished changing the front hub widths, we can just reinstall our hub nut. Do that up with the 22mm and we're good to go. Careful when doing up the nut on the stub axles. These little 17mm hubs don't have a spacer between the bearings, so if you crank this nut up too tight, the wheel spaces push on the bearings. This is really hard to move the hub and you're going to overheat your bearings. So what I like to do is put the ratchet into reverse and loosen the nut off until you can spin the spaces by hand. And that is the right tension for these nuts. We've got no lateral play in the hub, but you can spin the wheel spaces. So tuning karts is very simple. You got problems, solutions, and outcomes. So whatever you do when you're going to the track, try a few things out and write down the outcomes because they're pretty constant for you, your tires, your track, and then it'll help your learning process as well because you can review your data and your notes when you get home, when everything's calmed down. But as a general rule, for tight, twisty tracks, we're going to run our kart a little bit narrower, and then for big, wide, open, fast corners, we can widen the track. Try this for yourselves at home and let me know in the comments if it helps. Special shout out to Beth out of the Warwick Kart Club and also to Geordie here on the YouTube platform for always commenting on our videos. If you've liked this video and you want to see more from us, don't forget to turn on those pesky notifications. Thanks heaps for everybody tuning in. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Power Republic, and we'll catch you in the next video.